When the Second World War erupted, the world was plunged into chaos unlike anything humanity had ever witnessed, and amidst a storm of fire and steel, ordinary men were thrust into extraordinary circumstances. Imagine being a young German soldier, raised under banners of pride and propaganda, believing your nation was unstoppable, only to be captured thousands of miles from home and transported to a land you had only heard about in whispers and distorted images, the United States of America. For many German prisoners of war, arriving in American prison camps was a journey not just across oceans, but across mental landscapes, shattering illusions and forcing them to confront realities they had never imagined. They had been told by Nazi officials that America was a weak, decadent society, full of corruption, poverty, and moral decay. Yet, as their trains rolled through the American countryside, what they saw through bar windows told a completely different story. Sprawling cities alive with energy, endless fields of golden crops stretching to the horizon, and bustling factories roar with machines that seem to have no end. The sheer scale of American industry and the sight of civilians living with comforts that even high-ranking officers in Germany could not dream of shook them to their core. To these young men, it was as if they had been transported into another world, one where even ordinary workers enjoyed luxuries like fresh fruit, radio entertainment, and warm clothing, things scarce and rationed in their homeland. The emotional shock was overwhelming. Here they were, supposed enemies of the United States, but instead of cruelty or starvation, they were given food so abundant it felt unreal: bread, meat, potatoes, even sweets. And then came the true cultural thunderbolt: ice cream and Coca-Cola. Something so simple to Americans, yet so exotic and unimaginable to men who had grown up in wartime Europe. Many POWs later admitted that their first taste of a cold Coca-Cola felt like tasting the future itself, a liquid symbol of a modern world far beyond anything they had known. Ice cream, smooth and sweet, left them speechless, not only because of its taste, but because it symbolized something bigger. It represented the resources, the abundance, the sheer ability of America to not only fight a war on multiple fronts, but also to provide luxuries to prisoners. In those moments, as they held a chilled bottle of Coke or a bowl of ice cream, the German POWs felt both wonder and confusion. They had been taught to hate, to see Americans as enemies deserving of scorn. But how could you hate a people who treated you better in captivity than your own government had treated you as soldiers? This contradiction gnawed at them, creating inner battles that went deeper than bullets and bombs. For many, the experience marked the beginning of a quiet transformation, where loyalty to Nazi ideology cracked under the weight of undeniable truth. They saw with their own eyes that America's strength was not just in tanks and airplanes, but in its people's way of life, the freedom, the prosperity, the relentless optimism that powered its society. These impressions, burned into their memories, would remain long after the war ended, haunting them, inspiring them, and reshaping how they viewed the world. As days turned into weeks and weeks into months, the German prisoners began to see more than just the food and comforts of the American camps. They began to witness an entirely different philosophy of life, one that challenged everything they had been raised to believe. Many of these young men had grown up under the iron grip of Nazi indoctrination, told that strength came only through obedience, fear, and sacrifice, that prosperity could only be seized through conquest. Yet, in America, they were seeing a strength built on freedom and a prosperity born not from looting other nations, but from the sheer productivity of its people. The POW camps, while fenced and guarded, were not the brutal cages they had expected. Instead, they found libraries stocked with books, classes where they could learn English or mathematics, and opportunities to work and earn small wages, which they often spent on more Coca-Cola, chocolate bars, or even magazines filled with images of a thriving, confident society. The shock went beyond material abundance. It was cultural, emotional, deeply human. They wrote letters home, describing things that seemed almost like fairy tales. Guards who joked with them, townspeople who treated them with civility, and the sight of American children running freely in parks without fear of air raids. For men who had lived under constant propaganda that painted Americans as morally corrupt and culturally inferior, the truth was staggering. It forced them to ask questions they had never dared whisper. If America, their enemy, could treat them with dignity and offer such abundance to everyone, what had their own leaders been hiding from them? Many POWs later confessed that this realization was more painful than defeat on the battlefield. It was a slow death of illusions they had carried since boyhood. Evenings in the camps often became times of quiet reflection. Some men sat under the vast American skies, stars glittering above in numbers they had never seen back in smoke-choked Europe, and wondered what life might have been if their nation had chosen a different path. Others wept in silence, not just from homesickness, but from the confusing mix of gratitude and guilt. They were prisoners, yet freer in spirit than they had been as soldiers marching under the swastika. And when they were eventually repatriated back to Germany after the war, these memories did not fade. The taste of ice cream, the fizz of a Coca-Cola, the sight of endless trains carrying goods across America's heartland, all these small details became symbols of a bigger truth. That power did not only come from weapons, but from the ability to create, to provide, to uplift. Many carried these lessons into their post-war lives, becoming quiet advocates for a Germany rebuilt on different principles. Some even admitting that their time as American prisoners planted the seeds of doubt that helped them reject extremist ideologies forever. The story of these men is not just a tale of war. It is a deeply human reminder that even in conflict, kindness and abundance can break through hatred in ways no weapon ever could. And perhaps that is why, decades later, many of those former prisoners, when interviewed, spoke not of humiliation or bitterness, but of a strange kind of gratitude that in their darkest hour, they have been shown a glimpse of light, a vision of what humanity could achieve when driven not by destruction, but by creation. It was for them a paradox to have lost a war, yet to have discovered a truth that reshaped their lives forever.